without further ado, I invite the first speaker of the Affirmative team to stand and deliver their speech.
When the price you pay for not devoting yourself to your religion entirely, or not devoting yourself to your religion properly, is eternal damnation, you live a life of fear, a life of anxiety that means you're never able to truly be fulfilled in your existence. I'm going to do three things in the speech. First, some setup. Second, why we improve individual religious narratives and interactions. Lastly, why we reduce the harmful influences of organized religion. 3 points of setup then. Firstly, what kind of religion does side proposition support? We think it just looks like things like karmic justice or analogous to that concept. The only difference here is that there is no resurrection part of that. We are just whatever you do in your life, it will be paid off later down the life. Those kinds of narratives. Secondly then, what is an afterlife? I want to be clear here, there is not just one afterlife present in major religions. There are many afterlives, generally there are two afterlives, for instance, a heaven and a hell, and this dichotomy is often used very crucially. There's eternal, and it can either be one of eternal bliss, or it can be one of eternal suffering. What is the difference here in this debate then, insofar as we're still incentivizing religion on both sides? The key thing here is that devotion to religion often requires very specific acts that are usually different from just being a good person. Things like praying 5 times a day specifically. This debate is not about what different religions preach or what kinds of demands they make, for instance, whether or not it's to do terrorism or whether or not it's to be a charitable person. It's specifically about how individuals and their human psyche interacts with these religious demands. Now I want to explain why we improve individual religious narratives. Before I do that, I'll take a point. No point. Okay. Contextually, there is a large amount of anxiety associated with the afterlife specifically. This is for 4 reasons. First, it is eternal. It literally just lasts forever. There's no way of understating what forever even means. An individual just lives for 100 years. Your afterlife is going to be way more than that. Secondly, the alternative to good afterlives are eternal suffering. Hence, it very much plays on your anxieties as a person. Thirdly, you don't know when you're going to die, which means you never know when you've done enough to qualify yourself for a place in heaven, for instance. Lastly, the difference between good deeds and bad deeds are often calculated on net. So on our side, maybe you do one bad deed, but you know that will pay off in one bad deed done towards you. Alternatively, you don't know if the culmination of your good deeds and bad deeds are enough to qualify you. How does this influence people's individual reactions, interactions with religion then? Firstly, they spend a lot of time worrying because they're never sure whether or not they've done enough. But secondly, they devote excessive times to their religion. What is rewards in the afterlife improve this relationship on our side then? Firstly, karmic punishment is temporary and can be made up for. So you might do an act and you think it will pay off in the near future, but it's not about the aggregate sum of your acts. It's not about an eternal life that you have to live afterwards. Secondly, it's how nice you are to those around you exists on a spectrum, whereas the other side is very binary. And what this means is this binary nature of whether or not you're going to go to eternal bliss or eternal damnation is very harmful insofar as it's one or the other. Alternatively, if you do a morally great act, presumably someone's going to do a morally great act back to you. It's very the stress there is far less. But thirdly, you just know the rewards have paid off by the time of your death. I think this is very crucial, particularly where people die, for instance, where you know by the end of your life that there's no need to worry about anything more than that. That everything that everything good and bad that was going to happen to you has already happened, which means you can go off and rest peacefully. What are the outcomes here then? I think the main outcome here is that in emotionally distressing events, people spend a lot less time worrying. The kind of events we're talking about is when a family member dies or when you're near your death yourself. The reason why this is different is because firstly, there is no need to worry about what the kind of life your family member is living now. They're obviously dead, but the comparative is you're worried about whether or not they're living or suffering in hell, whether or not they're going to suffer eternally like that. But secondly, you can just feel your moment of catharsis process, and instead of worrying about what their life is like now, you can just take your own moment to process their death, because you know that the life that they have lived has been finalized. You know that if they did a lot of good deeds, they've already reaped the benefits of that. Comparatively, you just never know the difference here. Why is this important, and why is this debate winning? I think firstly, you have to understand these people view religion as very subjectively important. It's a very close part of who they are and how they conceive the world. So insofar as that informs their capacity to just live better lives, that's debate winning on its own. But before I move on to explain why we reduce the harmful influences of religion, I'll take a point.
Yeah, so you talk about how it's hard to calculate the accumulated good and bad of your deeds on our side of the house. I think on your side of the house, people go so far as that they expect positive validation for their acts. What is to stop people from going to extremes to get good benefits?
Okay, I'm unclear what the extremes here exist, but notice that the extremes exist on both sides, even if they were. We're talking about eternal bliss here. So if someone wants to tell you if someone wants to tell you that you'll get eternal bliss for some specific act that might be harmful to another, you're likely to buy that because it's eternal. Overall, then, we think that you're going to get some level of benefit on our side of the house. We don't think everyone's craving the perfect outcome, but I also just think people are kind of reasonable on that front. They don't expect to become a billionaire just because they help somebody. Why then do we reduce the harmful influences of organized religion? The context here is that the weaponization of the afterlife is incredibly powerful by organized religion. This links to all of our material about eternality and anxiety that people feel, but no, people just care about eternal suffering because we are biologically wired to avoid that in general. But I want to note here that religious texts tend to be very old and thus carry very outdated social norms. They can often be very conservative in what they demand of people. For instance, they're very against abortion or very against LGBT people in general. What does this coercion incentivize then? We would like to acknowledge here that this coercion is often used by organized religion in a variety of ways. For instance, they can use it to do good things charity and the love thy neighbor kind of analysis. But this can also do a lot of bad things. For instance, they can campaign against abortions. They can campaign against LGBT rights. In the extreme cases, they can advocate for terrorism, for instance, which can be incredibly harmful. I'm going to explain now why these benefits of organized religion are still accessible on side proposition. Firstly, I think state welfare is just incentivized to care for people, hence they'll be charitable overall. The kind of benefits that we're able to get for people probably still exist on our side. Secondly, people just want to be nice more broadly in society. But thirdly, I think karmic justice on net tends to just affirm good deeds, because when you are good to people, they always feel the need to reciprocate, so it's very likely that you get good deeds done in return. This is not the same for other things. So why don't these harmful deeds get support on our side of the house then? Firstly, karmic justice is just shown to be unrealistic, right? When being gay is seen as a sin, on their side you spend all your time worrying if that's going to mean that you're going to hell. Comparatively, it's just easy to see how freeing your life is when you marry another man and that's what you want in life, right? What this means then is it's easier to critique these harms that this organized religion is trying to tell you, because you're no, clearly I'm not living the terrible life you're telling me I'm going to live, so it's easy to critique those kinds of things. But secondly, I think people just believe that others will naturally be turned through karmic justice, right? There's a perception that when bad karma happens, people will just naturally change. And what this means and what this does for people is they stop trying to intervene in other people's lives because they think it's naturally going to happen. Comparatively with an eternal afterlife, you cannot change how people are going to, or you cannot change, when you have a belief in the afterlife, you think the onus is on you to prevent them from being horrible, or else they'll go into this eternal damnation. So this perception that they will naturally change on their own doesn't exist. But lastly, I think some of just the most extreme acts just don't work without an afterlife, right? If you're going to do a suicide bombing, clearly there's no way after that you're able to get karmic justice in your life, so you probably just don't do that in the first place. Alternatively, it's far more pernicious with an afterlife for those reasons proposed.
I thank the first affirming speaker for their speech, and I would like the first negating speaker to stand and deliver their speech.
Religion is the rock that quite a large proportion of humanity bases their life upon, and we think it's quite uncharitable how they have characterized our side of the debate, considering that they characterize their religion in this case based on the Abrahamic religions, which quite literally have commandments guiding you towards a better life in this sense, and therefore assuming that we have suicide bombers and just like people who are going to like abuse the whole afterlife scenario is simply just untrue and also principally unjust in this case, and I'll discuss this later in my case. So my first point is about the principle of faith, and then first substantive about why a lifetime rewards sets people up for failure, and secondly why lifetime rewards create an unhealthy precedent for positive reinforcement in this case. So what is devotion? 1, loyalty to your God and religion. This looks like obeying commands and living a pious life. Secondly, you follow the principles of your religion. This is like love thy neighbor. Note that this historically religions have done questionable things, but the core teachings we can both agree is principally good. So thirdly, faith, the devotion isn't just contingent on knowing in this case, and that would be my principle. So what does the world look like? 1, we prefer religions that teach rewards in the afterlife. This looks like people are taught to follow the principles and ideals of your religion. This looks like people maintaining a level of devotion throughout their entire lives. Secondly, when they make mistakes, they have the opportunity for forgiveness. The canon example being Jesus forgiving Judas. And when people make mistakes, acknowledging and repenting is fundamental for establishing full devotion. So what does their will look like? Religions teach you that you can get rewards for your devotion throughout your life. This looks like good karma, bad karma, and prayers are more likely to be answered if charitable or like follow a pious life. And if you do something bad, you face immediate repercussions in a sense. If they're going to accept all of the good values, they also have to accept the bad values in this case. So starting off with my principle, faith. The core idea of religion is faith. Religion would not be a religion if you knew the purpose of life. So if there is no faith, there is no faith if there is proof. The whole idea is that you are unknown. You are like ignorant in the immediate in the knowledge of whether or not why you are on this planet. So the whole idea of religion is that you have faith and that you're showing your love for your God because you're loving Him unconditional of the proof. That if you need proof to believe that like God exists, then you're not innately pious and not devoted to Him. So life is a test. If you know that your grade from the start, you're not going to act in the same spirit of that test. This therefore means that devotion can't exist without faith, and faith can't exist if you have proof in the form of tangible rewards that they get on their side of the debate. So why is this important? 1, when you get lifetime rewards, you do not have faith. So this looks like the shared hope of millions. Hope is quite literally the strongest emotion. It teaches you, if you teach something, people, that good will come, and it doesn't, you crush these millions of people that follow these religions, and you crush their hope. Secondly, it is not possible to be devoted on their side of the debate. You cannot, on their side, you cannot be devoted, therefore you cannot access these rewards. If you feel like a failure, and then you feel like a failure. If you're expecting tangible rewards in your lifetime and you do not receive these rewards because you are inherently not devoted, it starts a cyclical nature of distrust. This looks like a person who doesn't get a reward and therefore feels like their God has forsaken them, and so they then don't believe in the God, and therefore they in turn won't get this reward. This is a cyclical nature that they have started on their side of the debate, which they have to get themselves out of in this case. Starting off with my first substantive about positive reinforcement. Note that firstly, on AF, people are promised a reward if they follow this religion. Secondly, this is like an incentive to do good in this case. And thirdly, there are inherently bad things that happen, and what happens like when they do not get the reward or the punishment in this case. So 1, they feel unvalidated. They expect their God to be there for them. If a pastor tells you your whole life to do good stuff, and then you get good karma, and then you attribute that purpose to your behavior. You know, your entire life is focused around this purpose of this doing good things. So if bad things happen or you do not get the reward, you feel like your God has forsaken you, and your purpose that you've lived your entire life for is laid out to dry. So they're feeling like these people whose whole lives have been devoted to this religion are therefore feeling left that the pedestal that has the chair has been taken out from underneath them. So this house proves that secondly, they have a lot to lose. So note that a lot of people who follow religion need that hope. This is essentially finding the purpose. Like whether this is existentially where they need to find their place in the world, or finding or financially, like they need this hope in this case. They hope that God has a plan for them. So this looks like struggling. This looks like people that are struggling. Somebody who can't afford to put food on the table. However, they simply give their money to charity because God said, "Be charitable to other people." However, now they can't put food on the table because they think they're going to get an immediate reward of, I don't know, like food is going to fly out of the sky and land onto their plate. This is just simply not true. The nuances behind prayer and the answer to prayer is unknown to all of us. So how are they going to assume, on their side of the debate, they immediately assume that we are going to get good rewards after we have done a charitable deed. However, that is simply not the case, and the ways of God is unknown to us mere mortals. So these people have given their ultimate devotion, and they're going through struggle. Not only do they deserve this money, but they also need it. Thirdly, they are bound to fail because there are just some things that are not in our control. So why is this important? One, people lose faith, and we think this is fundamentally important because, as we have established, faith is critically important for devotion, and especially if these people are in dire circumstances. So hope is the only thing that they have in this case. Secondly, people attribute natural struggles to personal failure. So that, like, instant reward / instant punishment, it means that, like, if you've done something bad, it means that God must be punishing me for something if I have some sort of dire circumstance in my life. Like if my cat has died, then people immediately assume that I must have done something wrong to deserve this thing, because all of the good things that I do get a reward, and all of the bad things that I do get a punishment. So they immediately attribute these bad things that have happened into a life to personal circumstances, but this is simply not the case. So some things that can actually happen, some things that happen badly, on our side, we just empower them to actually fix these things themselves. I'll accept this POI.
What's the worst harm? People dying and realizing that maybe religion just isn't real, or being on their deathbed and worrying about the infinite damnation that they might be subject to?
So, like, I think that's like quite an ethical dilemma that we're currently wrestling with at the moment. I think it's like Euthyphro's dilemma about, like, why don't you not just, like, believe in God, because there's no downside if you do. There's no downside if God doesn't exist, but there is, like, an upside if the God does exist. I think that, like, trying to attribute this to this particular case is not only like fundamentally wrong, because, like, you cannot, like, it's literally a dilemma. Nobody knows the answer to this question. So we think that, like, giving these people the hope that they have, like, an eternal afterlife means that they're going to live their life good and actually, like, pursue good things instead of just trying to look for an immediate gratification on their side of the debate. So what happens when they either get rewards or maintain faith that they will come? One, they have the desire for more. It is unique to their side that they are getting tangible rewards and short-term gratification. This means not following the commandments because it is a good way to live, but instead you love thy neighbor because you expect that reward to come. Once again, you lose that devotion because you're expecting a tangible reward in return. Secondly, you become fixed on rewards. Note that when an organization that you have faith in tells you something, you are likely to take it extremely, as my second speaker talked about in his POI, and it creates an unhealthy dependence, and faith becomes consuming, and you think your prayers will actually feed your family. And then why is this important? One, it tackles the idea of greed in society. So religions that characterized by fall into, like, the Abrahamic faiths, which have these commandments. So, like, most of which condemn greed in the sense. So it is innately that their entire model is, like, contradictory to their faith. And then secondly, if taken extremely, you will either lose your faith or face an existential crisis. Both of these things are harmful to devotion, and which our side ultimately tackles. Cheers.
I thank the first negating speaker for their speech, and I invite the second affirming speaker to stand and deliver their speech.
Neg essentially frames to us in this debate that everyone who believes in religion essentially does it because they want the rewards, that they're devoted because they believe they get something out of this. I don't think this is true. 3 things in my speech, then first on some framing, second I'll be responding, and then third I'll be furthering our substantive case on how you actually feel and how you interact with this narrative in everyday life. So first on some framing then, I think it's essential to note that this isn't an act of debate. If people lose a faith in religion, it's probably not a bad thing. They never even explain why it's such a tangible harm, but also second of all, there are billions of happy atheists in this world. It's just unclear why it's really bad if people lose faith in religion. Moving on then about what they said, how we have to accept that if we want the good karma, we have the bad karma. I think it's pretty good that we do accept this because it just incentivizes people to act on good whims. It means that they're incentivized to do good deeds because there is this bad karma. Moving on then to this point about faith and devotion, note that like the entire case, or like half of the case, hinges on this point that faith isn't equal to devotion. If we prove that this isn't true, I think there's a large portion of their case falls through. First of all, this debate isn't in the perspective of religion. It's about if it's good or bad more objectively that you believe in this narrative that you are rewarded throughout your lifetime rather than when you're like in heaven or when you're in hell. But second of all, I just don't think this is true. When you have religion that is taught through this narrative, it means that the people who are part of your religion believe in this. That's why they are devoted. The devotion comes as part of what they've been taught, which is that you are rewarded throughout your lifetime. But third of all, religion isn't about if it's a test or it's about the unknown. It's about you believing in something, like something that's more supernatural, you believing in the greater good and the greater well, something that you're able to lean back on, something that's able to support you. I don't think that their entire thing on faith and religion just sticks. But then they tell you that like this thing on donations, how people now are going to go donate money to charities, or like when they don't have food on the table. First of all, this is symmetric. You probably want to appease the gods in both worlds, because if you're being told that you're rewarded or you're being damned for doing a sin or doing a good deed, it means that in either world you want to appease God. You're probably going to donate money to a charity as a homeless person anyways. But second of all, I think it's just even worse when you have this narrative that you get rewarded in the afterlife, because it means that in your entire life you're super unsure about how you're calculated the net benefits and like net sins that you've done. What this means is that you're just more anxious in everyday life about doing the good thing. If you're a homeless person, you're probably even more incentivized to donate to this like charity in the first place. That's even bad. We just co-op all of their harms. Before I move on, I'll take a point.
Wouldn't you say that expecting an immediate reward would then be like more incentivized to do good stuff for that immediate reward instead of somebody who has to wait for that long period of time to get that reward of an afterlife?
I think that is like I mentioned, is you want to appease gods. It's symmetric in both worlds, but it's even worse when you aren't told exactly if you're going to be rewarded or if you're going to be damned in the long term. That's when you have something pushing you that you just have to go and donate because you don't know. Maybe if you don't, this is a tipping point for you not getting into heaven. That's why it's really bad. They then tell you that it's like that people are going to lose their devotion in the long term. One, this isn't true. I already told you that the devotion comes from them understanding the narrative that you get rewards throughout your lifetime. They buy into this. They believe this. Like, they just think that they're going to get rewards throughout their life, and they think this is a good thing. They, like, enjoy this religion. They enjoy this narrative. But second of all, when your, like, acts of good deeds are affirmed in your everyday life, you just feel really good. You probably buy more into this religion. You probably feel better, because when you realize that the good things you've done are being rewarded, it's a good thing. I don't see why this would be off-putting for anyone to just suddenly ditch your religion when you get a good thing out of this. But moving on then about this thing they said about like family catharsis, knowing that they have a good afterlife. One, this isn't true. When you hinge everything on the afterlife, you have significantly more anxiety because of the reasons we gave you, like it being hard to conceptualize what it's like it's internal, like it's a net positive or a net benefit. What this means then is when your family member passes away, instead of feeling peace because you think they're in heaven, you're probably instead worrying constantly if they're in hell or if they're in purgatory, if they're suffering or not. Why is this more likely? Because one, you just don't concretely know, but second of all, your mind probably just tends to wander because you don't have any concrete evidence. The outcome of this is you just feel a lot worse because you're so worried about where your family actually has ended up. Comparatively, when you have rewards acting on you during your entire lifetime, this is a lot more concrete and you feel a lot more better. Why? Because one, you probably know that your mum has done good deeds throughout her life and she has been rewarded for this. This is a really good thing. But second of all, you don't worry about if they've done enough to hop that line between being in hell and being in heaven. There isn't that constant calculation about whether or not you're going to be able to enter the gates of heaven. That's why it's really important. Before I move on, I'll take a point.
if you live your life in fear, and like with regards to your point about net positive or net negative, however, like when you like on our side of the debate, wouldn't you live in constant fear that if you do something bad, you will fear the immediate pain that you will get in repercussion?
Yes, of course you would fear that you're going to get bad karma for something bad that you've done, but it's a lot worse when you have this net thing, because it means that when you've done something bad, you realize you have to do a whole lot more to repent for it, but you don't exactly know how much you have to do. You're just a whole lot more stressed because you have to repent. Whereas if you've done something bad and you face immediate repercussions, at least you know that thing is over and you're able to move on and face some other more benefits in your life. Moving on then about how you actually feel. I think when you believe the narrative that rewards happens in your lifetime, you internalize this and you apply it to your everyday life. What this means then is that you are likely to believe things happen as a result of your devotion. Why? Because one, we all have confirmation bias. When you believe something, everything you see is supposed to fit into this. Your human brain just does something to make this true. What this looks like is that you like do a good deed and you help your friend, or maybe you prayed a lot the previous day, and then now today you win your bingo game. You probably attribute this to the good deeds you did in the previous day. You believe that it was a reward of your devotion. That's why you have this confirmation bias. But second of all, things just happen in life and you want to find a reason for it. We want to feel like we're in control, we're in the know. That's why when something happens, good or bad, you attribute it to something that you've done in the past. But third, know that this just deals with the POI that they gave us and also the material, like that they told us about how you expect good things for your good deeds. I think that's just the idea that you have like this expectation means you actively find it, because your brain is telling you, oh, you did this good thing, you're probably going to get something good today. It means you do find it. You don't lose trust because your human brain just affirms everything that you already believe. You're going to be able to access this. The outcome of this then is that you believe in good things you do equals to good things like that happen to you. You experience this. One, you have this positive reinforcement. You just like become a good person overall because you want to continue in this positive cycle of reinforcement. That's a really good thing because it means you get better relationships. It means we get all of the benefits that Bruce told you about. But second of all, when you just have this perception, you feel a lot better and you feel a lot more joy in your everyday life. Why is this? Because A, you just feel a lot more in control. You know that if you do something good, you're probably going to face a really good repercussion in the next day. But also, you know, if you've done something bad, you face a bad harm, but it means that you're able to move on in the future. B, you feel a lot more hopeful because you think your life is good. Know that this is especially good for people who have previously sinned, because now they see they have hope to change. Maybe they face a really bad repercussion for taking drugs, but at least they know it's happened now and they're able to move on and do better things with their life. You give hope and outwell to the people who are the most vulnerable, the people who look forward to change. Comparatively, when you have done something bad like taking a drug and you realize that there is this narrative of eternal hell and eternal heaven, it means that you probably feel a lot more hopeless because you think that you're never going to be able to recover from this like net deficit that you've given yourself now in regards of like if you're morally good or not. That's really bad. And I think that at the end of this, what you should believe is that you feel a lot more hopeful when you think that you are in this positive reinforcement, when you're able to experience the benefits, but also you're just a lot less hopeless, especially those who have done something bad and now want to repent for it. At the end of this, you just get so much better like religion, so much better devotion. Everyone feels better. You have better interactions between people on our side of the house. So proud to affirm.
I thank the second affirming speaker for their speech, and I invite the second negating speaker to stand and dismiss their speech.
At the very worst, on-side negating, you get a lifetime of hope and real faith, which we think outweighs any short-term harm of some anxiety of internal damnation on your deathbed. But at least here, we think it's at least like less harmful than having a life of karmic paranoia and greed for positive reinforcement that is a far more severe harm than a short-term period of a bit of anxiety. So then quickly a bit of clarification on our principle. We heard that it wasn't important to the debate, but I'm going to tell you why. Firstly, we think hope is probably the most fundamental pillar of religion, note that a lot of the reason people buy into religion is because they are in a time of struggle. They want something to look forward to, they want something to believe in and to find purpose in their lives. We think that then, when their faith isn't actualized, because they rely on like these like positive, tangible things to like believe that it is real, when their faith becomes not real, they sort of lose that sense of purpose. For a lot of people, that's really important when they are in these struggling communities. They need a sense of hope to drive them to get out, or just to like feel like it's okay when they are in times of need. But secondly, we think it's even more crucial to debate because you can't have devotion without faith. How can you be devoted and like purposeful towards something that you don't actually believe in the sense that you only believe in the rewards that come your way when you fulfill or like tick a box? We think that this is extremely significant in that they can't really achieve anything on their side when it becomes really ambiguous as to how people can achieve devotion without having faith in the first place. You can't be loyal to something that you don't have belief in. So then, a point of clash on perception. Look, the main push here is that it's really hard to perceive how your good and bad deeds accumulate, and this would lead you to like take it extremely or misinterpret this. Firstly, I want to clarify, in our setup, we told you that there is quite a high bar for eternal damnation. And we think generally most people are going to meet that, but whereby they are able to pursue real faith for the rest of their life. At the very least, they have loyalty to their God, and I think that would be sufficient for them. This looks like maybe they like do struggle a little bit, but they are still like loyal, they still go to church, they still participate. But B, we told you how like on our side they understand like the concept of forgiveness, and like that there is a sense of imperfection that comes with like living a life towards that ultimate goal. But secondly, we think that most people are fairly rational and they don't do like extremely bad deeds on our side, whereby they have an ultimate faith in this God and like what will come for afterwards. They want to work towards it. We don't think that people are just going to be like killing people, which would be ultimately what it would take to like outweigh like the good deeds that you did for the rest of your life. But thirdly, we think the comparative is that you then directly know there is an immediate harm. For example, if you do something bad, something like is immediately going to come after that. We think that this should hold quite a lot of debate and weight in this debate, because when you tell a person in struggle that they will suffer because they maybe didn't put quite enough food on the table for their child because they physically couldn't, then you basically just perpetuate this narrative they're never going to succeed and they're going to get punished more. We think this is cyclical disenfranchisement from the religion, in the sense that they actually don't have the capacity to achieve these high goals, and now they're getting punished further for it. Not only do they disassociate with that religion, but they suffered the physical harm of getting punished and suffering from karma. Yeah, I'll take your POI.
Are all the billions of people who believe in karmic justice in our world just faithless, miserable, and really greedy?
Yes. So then, on interpretation of that perception, why do people take it extreme? Sorry. Jacob gave you an entire point on why people look for positive enforcement. I think that was sufficient. I don't want to waste my time on that. So why do they take it extremely? They have a tangible incentive. This is the unique harm on side affirmative. When you give someone a set of goals, like a religion, which is highly ambiguous, they're likely to take this extremely. I'm going to analyze a few groups here. Firstly, on the average person, we think that this looks like praying immensely for positive enforcement onto your life, instead of going to work for money, because you just think that that could fulfill everything. But we think at the very least here, it looks like praying to God about how much you love your family, as opposed to just telling them that you appreciate them and that you love them. We think that's the kind of harm that the average person loses when they think that telling God that they love their family is going to get more benefits for them, as opposed to how joyous it just feels for your parent to tell you that they care about them. Then for the people in struggle, look, I don't think this is symmetrical, that people just give away things for religion on our side. I think they understand that in hardship, the perseverance that they display is enough to show that they maintain good character and still have the positive incentive of an eternity in heaven. So we think on your side, when they're told that they do get rewards for their actions, they're differentially incentivized, because when they are in struggle, they just rely on a donation or a good action to get them out of that. There are a couple of harms here.
Firstly, these people already have a lot to lose, and that you're now encouraging them to give away more in the belief that will help them. We think that this is largely unsuccessful, like to the extent where karma maybe doesn't like help them in the way that they believed, or it just doesn't happen at all. But secondly, you remove any empowerment for them to just have perseverance and get out of it on their own. They have ultimate faith that God will just reward them, as opposed to like working hard and just trying to get out of it. I think that's really important when you look at like cyclical cycles of like poverty. When you look at like cyclical poverty, and people now just get further trapped in this because they just like ultimately believe that their faith will get them out of it, as opposed to just like working hard and breaking that cycle. Yeah.
Even if it doesn't help them to donate to something or to do a good deed, if they think they get something good out of it, is that not a good mindset for them to carry to their everyday life?
It's not really a good mindset when they don't have enough money to put food on the table because they gave their last $20 thinking that like God would give them some like positive enforcement onto their life. So then on extremists, why do we think that they employ a responsibility to perpetuate these goals on earth? Firstly, they think they will get good karma for helping other people correct their mentality, like fix them. But secondly, they think that like they are doing good in the act itself. So what does this manifest into? Firstly, we think it looks like forcing their beliefs onto other people. This looks like extremist religious groups like the Taliban, who like perpetuate like the words of God, but like do it in a way where they're just like actually like harming women or just like harming people as a whole. Why is this important? Firstly, it's like an extremely bad image, and secondly, it's just like extremely antisocial behavior that's really harmful. So then on my substantive about how a lifetime rewards and karma creates harmful social narratives. Look, when you hear an expectation from a religion, two things happen. Firstly, the application is ambiguous, and secondly, it's often taken to the extreme. So this means that when people perceive the world around them as highly influenceable, and uniquely when your situation is associated with your devotion. This looks like, firstly, people living in paranoia, they're scared that their natural struggles are going to lead them to have bad karma. But secondly, and most importantly, when this does happen, they assign blame. This means when they see a homeless person on the street, they're like, oh, you must have done something terrible with your life, you're a bad person, you deserve to be there. Or when something bad happens to themselves, they like feel like extremely like depressed because they think they must have like done something or like something further is going to happen, when the reality is that no one's perfect and bad things do happen. Why is this important? Firstly, it creates a culture of like hatred, and I'm very proud to negate.
I thank the second negating speaker for their speech. I invite the third affirming speaker to stand and deliver their speech.
Look, I don't think it's quite fair for negating to come up here and say that there's a very high bar to get into hell, when Islam is literally forcing people to wear veils, to go around and do a whole lot of things, just so that they don't get into hell. I think that that is very unclear as to why it is likely to be the case. I think that when you are trying to force people to do certain things, as we told you at first, when you are weaponizing narratives of hell, that is when you have incentives to create low bars to get into hell, so that you can get people to do the things you want them to do. Two things in my speech, firstly on hope, and secondly on worry and anxiety. So then, firstly on hope, what did we hear from the affirming team? Two things broadly. Firstly, the idea that on our side we're going to lose faith. And secondly, this idea that you're going to be waiting for food or like positive reinforcement. Why are neither of these like sufficient or true? firstly, like on this idea of losing faith, we've given you a number of responses to this already. Firstly, we told you like right down the line at first, and this was unresponded to, that people can kind of just like act nice to you when you act nice back to them. It's like you get a positive benefit from that, which means that you probably do get some level of benefit from acting nice. You probably do get some level of karmic benefit. But secondly then, at Sarissa, we already told you that you get confirmation bias in the sense that you are trying to find this positive benefit, so you're probably less likely to lose faith when you are looking to actively support your faith, and thus you can attribute certain things to your faith, to your good acts. But then thirdly, also like a new response, is that it's unclear why they can just like push this characterization of it having to be immediate on us. I think that insofar as religions probably just like want people to stay in the religion, they are likely to tell you that it can happen any time in the next like year or a couple years. I think it's unclear why it's just like got to be immediate. I think that when you want people to stay in the faith, you're likely to just like tell them that it will happen sometime in your lifetime. That is the kind of thing we're standing for. It was very unclear why it had to be immediate. It was very unclear why people are going to turn off as soon as they don't see it immediately being the case. But also just like fourthly, it was very unclear why it is important for them. It's very unclear why this is the unique metric to get hope. We already told you that there are a whole lot of happy atheists in the world. People get hope from a lot of other sources. People get hope from their family. People get hope from their jobs. We think that hope is not unique to religion. I think it was unclear why this is a particularly important thing in the debate. I think we are willing to trade this off even if they get better hope. But then secondly, on their claim on like positive reinforcement and waiting for food, I think that like it is very unclear why this is likely to like be a difference on our side. We think that insofar as you can like attribute things to like you're looking for things to attribute your karmic benefit to, like insofar as you're still like actively working, you're still looking for things. That is to say that you might just attribute your luck to karmic benefit. That means to say that you're probably just like unclear as to why you're going to like want to donate your only food to like people just like food. I think it's unclear exactly why this is likely to be the case. But also just like it's very unclear why it's different on their comparative. I think that throughout history, people have had to pay a lot of money to the church such that they get told that if you don't pay this kind of money, you're going to go to hell. I think that historically the Catholic Church has collected a lot of money in the form of like just priests telling people that they need to pay this money. I think that that is their incentive when they need this kind of money to run the church. But then also just like, because we already told you that it is not immediate necessarily, that is the kind of thing that you're not going to just wait for it to fall out of the sky as they told you. Like it's very unclear why that is necessarily the comparative. It's very unclear why people who like don't have food are going to like be able to suddenly afford it on their side, or are going to be able to like, just suddenly decide to donate it. I think that then means that there's a very little difference then, even if you believe their material. I think what we gave you at second already about people being able to repent, people having more hope in terms of the fact that they can, like if they're on drugs, if they're having difficulties, if they sinned, their punishment is not going to be eternal. It is not this idea of like this intangible idea of a net benefit that they can never like achieve like repentance for their sins. It is the idea that this is a temporary punishment that you can then get over by doing these good karmic acts to make up for it. They didn't respond to that. I think that then means that we probably just do get better hope, and even if you do buy that they get some benefit on hope, it was very marginal. It was very unclear why it is a particularly big difference or a particularly important thing in the debate, especially when compared to our materials about people literally living in anxiety their entire lives. So I think that then means that they do not win on this point of clash. I'm going to be moving into the point of clash on worry and anxiety, but before that, I will take a point.
You said that like the Catholic Church has a history of like you either have to pay this money or you go to hell. Isn't this symmetrical? Because if you do not pay the money, then you will get the immediate punishment tomorrow.
It's not immediate punishment, as I already told you. I think that if you've been listening to my speech, you would have heard that. But also just like, insofar as it's symmetrical, like, that's just like, bad. I think that like, on both sides, that just means that there is no change. I think that just means that you cannot win off a positive push on this material. I think that then means that our positive push on worry is what wins this debate. So then, what did we tell you? We told you two things, insofar as the fact that on the comparative, you are likely to be worrying about going to hell, and we also told you this stuff about weaponization of religious narratives, which I think was never properly engaged with down their bench. I think that we gave you that analysis right at first, and that was something that they didn't really respond to, apart from a couple of implicit responses. So then firstly, just what did we tell you about hell? We told you the fact that you never know when you're going to go to hell, which means that you are continuously worrying about this. This means that the response that they gave to you at second, that you are like, it's like a short period on your deathbed, was never actually like responding to the mechanisms we gave you at first, that this is something you never know when you're going to die. You never know if you've done enough to go into heaven. I think that means that still stands. But also, we told you that it's very hard to conceptualize this idea of a net benefit, a net like sin zero. The only response they gave to that was a second of this idea that it's like a high bar to get into like heaven, or like to get into hell. It's like you have to do a lot of bad things. I think that like insofar as religions probably just have incentives to keep people coming back, you probably just like like have to tell them certain things about you need to pray in order to get this kind of thing. I already told you about how Islam does that, insofar as it tells people that if they don't act modestly, if they don't conceal their themselves in their veils, if they don't wear this hijab or conservative dress, that is the kind of thing that can get them sent to hell. That is the kind of thing that can get them punished. I think that then means that it is still true. They've just asserted that there's not a high bar. I think that insofar as the religion has an incentive to keep people coming back, has an incentive to make money so that they can keep coming back to charity, has an incentive to get believers, that is unlikely to be the most likely characterization in their debate. So then I think that at the end of that point, it is very clear that you are going to be continuously worrying not only about whether you are going to go to hell, but also when your family members die, when your mother has just passed away, you're going to be worried about whether she has done enough in her life to get to heaven. You're going to be continuously thinking about whether she is suffering eternally now, whether she can never escape from that. I think that is the biggest harm in your day-to-day life, when you're just feeling really, really worried, and we're wondering if you're sinning, if you're net negative at the moment. I think that is really harmful. But secondly then, we told you all this stuff about weaponization. We told you that you probably have really old, religious texts. That just looks like the Bible. That just looks like the Old Testament as well, but also the New Testament's also really old. I think that also just looks like the Quran. I think that looks like Islamist groups just telling people to act really conservatively. That looks like people like conservative Christians in America being anti-gay and telling people that they can't be gay. I think that just means that is a very net negative. I think that we told you 2 reasons why this changes on our side. It happens because you see that even if the common religion is telling you that you will get punished for being gay, you just see that gay people continue to live a happy life for their whole lives. Note that this is not in contention with the stuff about not immediate punishment, because you can see that gay people continue to live happily for their entire life and never receive punishment, whereas on their side they could be suffering eternally. But also secondly, we told you the fact that you're waiting for karmic punishment to naturally change people's behavior, whereas on their side there's a much bigger harm of eternal damnation, which means you're much more incentivized to pull people into the religion, to force your kids to conform. That is a really net negative, insofar as you're forcing them to do something they do not want to do. They're harmed and they're mental health suffering. I think that they never responded to that. Their only responses were that it is a good, that religion has good tenets. I think that I've already shown why that isn't true, but also their response was that you're going to blame someone for suffering. I think that just happens on both sides. You blame someone for sinning, you blame someone for acting negatively karmatically. I think that means that the most important thing in this debate is the weaponization, is the worry that you get from hell. If you believe that you worry about hell, or if you believe that the afterlife gets weaponized, you should give us this debate based on worry. They can never win on hope or faith. It is unclear why that is particularly important. Thank you.
I thank the third affirming speaker for their speech, and I invite the third negating speaker to stand and deliver their speech.
The affirming team has said at the end of their third speech that we cannot win on faith or hope and anxiety. I think that's completely unrealistic, but I'll also respond to their material on weaponizing to show that we can win in all of these areas. I'm going to go through 2 clash points with a lot of sub-points to do with these things. They kind of lead into each other on anxiety, which also includes the weaponization, and then going into hope. They talked a lot about how people are scared because they never know, have I done enough to repay, the bad things I've done? They don't know when they die. I think they're, religion, in a sense, is not to have, a blank slate or to be I've done this many good things. No, I've done this many bad things, but I did this many good things, so it's all weighs out, so I'll be fine. It's about knowing that, like, through your faith and your devotion to your God or to your religion, that you believe in those, like, fundamental values. So yes, you did, like, one bad thing, but because you do believe in those values, you're not going to be like, oh, I need to go, like, donate $300 to charity to, like, make up for that $100 thing I stole. You're thinking, I shouldn't have stolen that because of these core values that I, at the end of the day, do believe in. So on us, so like on a whole, on our side of the debate, we show that religion is a reflection of not just like what you get in return, but a reflection of these values. They can like understand the fact that they have done enough to repay for what they've done by just continuing like live a life of like devotion to their religion and God. I think it's a big part of the religion that God is forgiving, and it's more likely that people will believe that God at least sees they're trying to like stick to those values instead of like weighing up like it's a math equation, like how many good things do they do, how many bad things they do. It's more about like what you believe in your core than like necessarily what your actions are, as opposed to on the affirming side where people have only have faith in tangible rewards. They're not following religion because of like what their belief in the core values. They're following religion because of like what they might be getting out of it at the end of the day. Why is this important? On our side of the debate, we have consistency. People have the belief that even if they messed up, they don't have to then go and suffer because they made a mistake. They can then continue to live their life by these like beliefs and then like repent for these things and then get rewards for this later on. On the other side, they have the belief that it doesn't matter if they did something bad because they can deal with the bad repercussions and move on, which they have characterized themselves, and I'll get onto more about why that's bad in a second. This means that they move on from these bad things with no real remorse and no real like reassertion of their faith in the actual core beliefs that they're meant to be believing in this religion. So onto like them talking about how people do bad things and then they can move on, so it's like a blank slate. Even if you don't believe any of what I just went through, I think it's fair to say that some, like the fear that they're talking about them having on our side, it can be good, especially when combined with the hope that I'll get into my next point. If this fear drives someone on their deathbed to go like donate all of their money to a charity because they believe they haven't properly compensated for like sins they may have done, I don't think it's so bad for our side to claim that harm, because at the end of the day they're still like compensating for bad things by doing good things in return. So I think this fear is not necessarily a bad thing, and I think a lot of all these materials not responded to, such as like paranoia, that is like applies on their side. How is that then that fear not symmetrical on both sides? Yes, you have the fear in the afterlife, but as I just went through, you have that reassurance that by sticking to those beliefs that like you hold so fundamentally at your core, you'll be able to like repent that. Well, on their side, you do something bad and there's nothing you can do after that. You don't know when they said it's not immediate. Surely that makes it worse if it's not immediate, because you don't know if like you're going to get the bad karma in a week, in a month, if it's going to happen to you directly or if it's going to happen to someone you love. I feel like that anxiety and that fear can be far more serious because you don't have that reassurance that you can repent, that your God is forgiven, that He will see that at your core you believe in those values. So on to I'll take a few right now.
If it's so true that religion on our side only cares about rewards and nothing about values, why is it not the exact same on your side, that people only care about the afterlife and nothing about values?
I don't think it's completely true that everyone on your side only cares about the reward, but I think it is true that people see that when they make a mistake, they can just like move on from that after. They don't have to like think and reflect on like why they did that thing that goes against their religion. While on our side, if you do something that goes against your religion and you're there like, oh no, what if I now go to hell for this? You have to think about what part of me, like what made me go against my beliefs in that moment. So it just like causes a lot more deeper thought for people, and they can like then end up showing a lot more remorse. So onto the sort of like, you can weaponize it, like the church making people pay money, saying you can go to heaven or whatever if you pay for like the church to get a new roof. I think this is completely symmetrical on both sides. It can also like kind of end up worse on the affirming team side, as on our side, like because on their side they can still weaponize those same things. You can say if you pay for this then something good will happen to you next week, and if you don't pay for it then like you don't know what will happen next week. At least on our side they like you have eternal damnation. On the affirming team side, like I don't know, maybe your kid will get cancer, maybe your kid will die, maybe you'll get hit by a car, maybe you'll just like drop your $10 note. You have no idea, and I think that anxiety of just not knowing is far worse on their side. So on to more to do with anxiety, they talked about how you don't have to worry about like you or others' well-being in the afterlife, because I believe it was their first speaker pushed this a lot, like everything that's good or bad has already happened to you. You don't have to worry about that stuff. Like as we talked about a lot, hope is a massive thing from people, and they also sort of talked about how hope comes from other places and atheists have hope, but I think that's like in this context we're talking about religious people, and like so I feel like that kind of falls out of the base, that doesn't apply here. And no matter, like if you think of it as like an impoverished person living in a war-torn country, no matter how kind that person is, no matter how many good things it does, at the end of the day no good karma like is gonna like be enough for them to completely turn their life around. They can move to a completely new country, get a job, and get these. I think it's completely unrealistic to like characterize any of that, but at least on our side of the debate they have hope that yes, maybe if I'm kind to the other people around me also struggling, I then have like a life of eternal bliss waiting for me afterwards. Well, on their side of the debate, if that person is then taught that like everything good and bad is happening to them in their life, they're like, well, this is where my life is peaked, sitting like starving in the street on like streets that are currently being bombed. And I think that's completely terrible to make that person think that that's like the peak of their life. That's the extent where it's going. Religion is meant to like give people hope for something like bigger than themselves, and on our side of the debate we uniquely get that hope. And then they talked about how like you feel anxiety about other family members, like if your mom dies, like did she do enough, is she in hell? I think like this also applies with that same analogy for one, but I also think it's a completely different harm if you think like your mom is like so bad she's gonna go to hell. If you think like say you've got a kid with cancer, that kid's growing up in and out of hospitals, you teach them to follow religions, they can like get rewards, but then that kid dies because they've got like stage 4 cancer. You're then thinking, one, you could be thinking, did I do enough? Maybe if I was a little bit better, that kid would survive, which is more about the guilt we were talking about before. You're thinking, maybe I didn't teach the kid to be kind enough, so they're not getting those benefits. And you have to worry about the fact that that kid's life peaked at 13 in a hospital, because everything that's good or bad that's ever going to happen to them has already happened. That life's like, that kid's life peaked like sitting in like a chemotherapy room, instead of having that hope, the potential of them having a better life afterwards, which I think is so much what religion is based off, that hope for like something better after. I don't think many people are going to look at their 13-year-old kid with cancer and be like, I think they're going to hell because they don't have the right values. I think like that's completely unrealistic. They talked about like confirmation bias, how you sort of believe what you want to see, and I think a lot of the time like people admire their parents, they admire their kids. They're not going to be like, oh, and like in majority of situations they're not going to be like, oh, my mom was a terrible person, like I think she's going to go to hell just because I'm just like scared of that. I think most people see their parents and other people they love in like a positive light, and therefore they have that hope. So I think on our side we do win on hope, less anxiety, and the fact that weaponization is symmetrical.
I thank the negating speaker for their speech, and as is customary, I will now reverse the speaking order, and I invite the negation reply speaker to stand and vote their speech.
I think we win this debate where we provide hope, even if marginal, to the most crucial people in religions, to the people who do need it, and where we don't like punish them for the struggles of day-to-day life. That is the weaponization that is extremely harmful, even if there's like a symmetrical cost of like some people misinterpreting it or some people weaponizing the benefits and harms on either side. The hope that we provide should be weighed the most highly. So then on interpretation, which is like the extremism side, look, we hear this big call that weaponization is like is bad on our side because people are scared of like eternal damnation. Look, I think we give some sufficient responses to this down the line about why like a person's incentive is not necessarily to like weaponize it, as opposed to like foster like good beliefs into people and encourage them to like reflect and be devoted towards their religion. But I think that at the very least here, there's like a symmetric harm if whereby like on their side people just weaponize the fact that like if you don't do something in a certain specific like ambiguous but yet strict criteria, you are like going to like suffer some immediate consequence, or like even if it's a delayed consequence as they're like claiming down the line. I think that therefore it's not only symmetric but far more harmful on their side, whereby like you're weaponizing something that isn't actually necessarily fulfillable. We give you sufficient material down the line about why there is like natural like struggles and stresses that everyone goes through. It's ambiguous as to like how you can apply your religious devotion towards that and like whether or not you fulfill that. But B, there is like a tangible harm and outcome like when you don't fulfill that like ambiguous goal. So we tell you that there are some harms on their side though. For example, firstly on like greed, and we hear kind of in response that it's not immediate gratification, so people don't just like get stuck in these gratification cycles. Look, firstly, I don't think this is a sufficient response insofar as that people are still seeking a tangible benefit. This means that they're not actually like doing these things out of the kindness of their heart or the devotion for their God, but like the fact that they want some sort of beneficial outcome for them, some good karma, or they want to correct some bad karma. But secondly, like in terms of the harmful, like the bad karma, the quality of the reflection they get on their side just like isn't really sufficient in terms of that. On their side, they just get punished and they think that's enough. They think that, I've received my bad karma, I'm neutral now, that's great. So we think people just sort of like scrape by on that minimum and don't actually just strive to be better than before and like work towards being a better person and like not only like pursuing that devotion at the minimum level, but to a higher quality. I think that's a benefit. If you think that we do get this like uncertainty of like the weaponization on our side, at least people are constantly striving to be better. If we get better devotion and better people and like we act better in society, that's really good. Then on like extremism, we told you that like they take karmic justice into their own hands and take it as their duty, and that they're more likely to take it to an extreme level on their side because they think that they get some tangible benefits, or they want to like be like a vigilante and prevent other people from having bad karmic benefits, bad karmic harms. Like, I don't think we heard really much response here, so I want to say that like that's more extreme on their side, but at least I think this weaponization point comes to a near equal. Where we do win then is on hope, where we, at the very minimum here, improve the quality of the connection with the religion. We've given you so much impacting down the line about why people have such a strong connection with religion and why it isn't so important to them to have this sense of hope and faith. And secondly, that they don't feel like a failure when they fail. Like they feel like their faith and their devotion will still get them through it. They don't feel like disenfranchised from the one thing that like maybe gives them a sense of meaning or like stability in their life. They reflect and they're remorseful. They get like a higher quality of devotion. They feel like more secure. On F, we tell you that one, actively punished by God, leaving them only like hateful or like confused. Secondly, they have constant paranoia against karma, and thirdly, this manifests into toxic culture of like victim blame and like guilt for like not saving your kid with cancer. Very, very proud to negate.
I thank the negation reply speaker, and I invite the affirming reply speaker to stand and deliver the final speech for the debate.
What I'm still unclear about at the end of this debate is why, because of this difference here, that religion so fundamentally shifts that people lose out all of hope and all the moral values preached in religion no longer exist. all the people who believe in karmic justice in this world right now still carry these same moral values. It was unclear why that was the difference. I'm going to talk about two things in this speech then. First, on the emotional experience of religion. Second, on how you treat people in either world. First, on the emotional experience. The large push from side opposition was that religion on our side was one where no hope existed and people were just inherently very greedy, chasing the next short-term gain. What have we told you in response to this then? Firstly, their material about deeper considerations when you do bad things in life, for instance, was likely to be symmetric. The framing from first was that religion was likely to preach the same things on both sides, preach the same values, for instance. And Jacob's clarification responds to their material here about the reflection, or being able to reflect on yourself to a better extent. Because the kind of karmic justice was never going to be immediate gratification. And even if you don't believe this in terms of a religious aspect and incentives to have immediate gratification, you also just note that religion here doesn't exist to the fundamental degree that we believe is likely to just have some delays there, which means that people still reflect to the similar extent that you likely buy. But it's also unclear why people on neg were just doing things out of the kindness of their own heart. They believe in the afterlife, they still care about this net benefit that exists on the in their later life, but this gets exacerbated when it's eternal, which means people are more likely on their side to just do things out of their own personal benefit. Second thing we told you was that hope could still exist in this debate, right? It was unclear why future material benefits to people's lives was also unable to lead themselves to hope. I think they kind of bring themselves down with in this specific instance when they describe people doing good deeds when they're in terrible places in the hope of being able to live better lives. I think at the end of this, you just believe that the hope material is broadly symmetric. What we told you then instead that wasn't responded to, or to the sufficient extent that we want, was that people are going to be far more cathartic in times of very hard experiences. And the reason why this was a unique benefit was firstly, they never